Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how the Brexit narrative will inevitably change when Labour are in power and what they need to do in order to keep dismantling the extreme Tory Brexit whilst keeping the public on side. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So Peter Foster, who writes a lot about Brexit matters, has been writing in the Financial Times that the right-wing reaction to Labour proposing cooperation with the EU on asylum issues is just a taste of things to come. And he's absolutely right. He points out that the language the Tory client media have been using, words like surrender or plotting, and I've said a few times before, the language will change. Consider that Rishi Sunak has also been trying to get an agreement with the EU. I mean, the fact that his idea is a complete non-starter because it's not reciprocal is neither here nor there. The hard Brexit media might tut at Sunak for talking to the EU, but they'll put a positive spin on things for the sake of supporting the Tories. Once Labour in power, they will dial up the crazy to 11, and it will be for everything. Every Brexit problem right now is covered up or excused. Every Brexit problem then will be because Labour are making a mess of it, or they never really believed. They were always opposed to it. Consider what the pro-Brexit media are bellyaching about, with regards to Labour's asylum plans. It's the aspect which involves cooperating with the EU. I mean, Labour have been discussing all facets of their asylum plans this week. They're talking about setting up extra safe asylum routes. Well, no. The Tory client media aren't interested in that. They've said that, of course, they will accept asylum claims from people who arrive in the UK via whatever route. They're not going to ship them off to Rwanda. Well, they're not interested in that either. But they're going completely ballistic at the prospects of talking to the EU about trying to solve common problems. And they will absolutely react in exactly the same way for every single aspect of EU cooperation, and under Labour, there'll be a lot of efforts for that. As I keep saying, Brexiteers, they're sort of roughly split into three types at the moment. The first of those pretending that it's all going swimmingly. There aren't many of those left, but there's the odd one. The second are those outside of government, no real links with government, the likes of Nigel Farage. They are bemoaning the state of Brexit and blaming it on the timidity of the government. Then there are those in or connected to the government. They are also making excuses, but ones that involve blaming others, not themselves. With Labour in charge, all three camps can once again unite to say that, it's Labour destroying the dream. We're nearly there. It wasn't going terribly well, but it was almost there. And now it's all gone. It's because Labour have destroyed it. They're fools. And the issue for Labour is that while Brexit remains incredibly divisive amongst the public, they want as little discussion on Brexit taking place as possible. I mean, people will say, Labour are afraid to talk about Brexit. It's like, well, yes or no, depending on how you look at it. What they don't want is to talk about Brexit, because what they want to talk about is healthcare or the economy, standard of living. That's what they want to talk about, because that's what voters are interested in. And I've said, what Labour will want to do is to deal with Brexit issues like you would any international agreement, all perfectly normally, lots of technical discussions behind closed doors, the occasional press statement that's far too boring to report on, while the Labour government promote more exciting progress made on the cost of living and on efforts to stop school and hospitals buildings falling down. And as long as Labour can keep those discussions with the EU technical and boring, and as long as they're making good progress on the issues which matters most to voters, so that has to be reported, they should be able to move quite quickly. When it comes to the cost of living, for example, there are a few factors influencing things. First, there are the actual global factors, which the Tories keep pointing at. There's only so much an isolated Britain can do about those. But then there are the factors caused by Tory greed, like artificially high energy bills, or Brexit trade friction, which a Labour government can do something about. But the Tory press will fight every move, very loudly, very aggressively. Foster makes a good point about carbon border taxes in his article. We could quite easily align our carbon systems with the EU, eliminate one source of trade friction basically overnight. But it would mean adopting EU net zero policy. Now, this should be relatively straightforward because Labour's net zero policy is in tune with EU policy anyway, and the public would be in favour. But it will nonetheless involve letting the EU set a policy which we will just, as the Telegraph will report it, slavishly adopt when we have no seat at the decision table. And this was always going to be a big Brexit battle at some point in the future. If you think about the types of Brexit that in theory were possible, after the referendum, the default position was leaving the EU, but remaining in the single market and customs union because the referendum did not ask about that. Now, it was never realistic because it's not what Brexiteers actually wanted, but they did at least campaign to remain in the single market. Talk of the customs union was more varied, but like I say, that was not on the referendum. But let's say we had left the EU, but remained in the single market at least. That would mean adopting rules which would be very genuinely imposed on us. Because for all the talk of our having to adopt foreign rules when we were members, it was a nonsense. We helped decide those rules, and indeed, we were so influential, it was hardly possible for any rule to be adopted that did not have UK support. But putting the situation in reverse, as we ease trade friction, we increase political friction. Labour will need to show how people's lives are getting better as each layer of trade friction is removed. You know, there'll be so much political friction, you could be forgiven for wondering if Labour will tie themselves in knots over some of the issues. I confess to finding it difficult to believe that Labour will put their heads down, charge at the Brexit elephant and expect to have the results to show the electorate come the following election, because that's what needs to happen. They need to just go, get your heads down. The press are going to go absolutely mad. Cannons to the left of us, cannons to the right of us. Charge and then get through to the election. That being said, and people will be instantly saying, well, of course they're not going to do that. They're far too cautious. That being said, Labour have to deliver not only a stronger economy if they are to win that second election, but the public have to feel that that stronger economy is directly benefiting them. It's no good pointing to figures and going, oh, look, stronger economy. People need to feel it. One of Sunak's problems at the moment, and he's got many, is that he keeps pointing to what he thinks is encouraging economic data. But the cost of living is just getting worse for people. There is a disconnect between the results that Sunak is happy with and the voting public. Labour have to make sure that that Brexit reversal is very much tied in a very obvious way to improving living standards. Although, if we are wondering if Labour in government will be bolder in opposition, we won't have long to wait. It is standard political behaviour to carry out your most controversial work early in the parliamentary cycle, and then you sort of tinker more towards the end. At the start of the parliamentary cycle, you have years before you have to face the electorate. If you put some noses out of joint, it'll all blow over come the election, as long as things have turned out all right in the end. But the closer you get to the election, the less keen you will be to do anything which might seem, scary. And everything you work on needs to yield a shorter term return. Something you do straight after the election, as long as you can show some progress after 4 years, you're fine. Once you're a year away from the election, now we need to show progress within a few months. So you do your scariest work right after the election, when the public have invested with you lots of political capital and you've got years to show that your scary sounding schemes are actually working. Which means that if Labour are going to go for it, we'll see evidence within a matter of months of them forming a government. But the Tory press will rage. Consider the way they attacked this asylum plan to work with the EU. Oh, it's going to mean an extra 100,000 EU migrants, most of them are saying. The odd ones even saying 120,000. Suella Braverman's talking about millions because she never reads the memo properly. Being clear, these figures are, of course, completely fabricated. And they will fabricate numbers for absolutely every area of common interest that Starmer tries to work with the EU on. Will he face them down? Focus his own efforts on domestic issues, because he can do lots of that. They'll get in the press. I mean, reforming the House of Lords, that is still very much party policy. That's going to generate a lot of interest. That is going to generate a lot of interest. So Keir Starmer can absolutely be putting his shoulder behind lots of things domestically that will take up time in the reporting cycle, and let David Lammy work on agreements with the EU behind closed doors, making very boring statements about progress. Be interesting to see. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.